Hey guys, and welcome back to the Outer Rim. My name is Gabe, and today, with the help of one of my fellow Outer Rim admins, we'll be discussing the latest Star Wars show, Obi-Wan Kenobi. It'll be the first two episodes. But first, if you enjoy talking about Star Wars, come over and join us in the Outer Rim, a Star Wars group on Facebook. We're dedicated to positive and constructive discussion of the series without all the crazy hate and vitriol we see online. So yeah, how's it going, Drew?
I just realized I muted myself for the intro. Forgot to unmute. But yeah, it's going pretty good. I'm here yet again, faceless. It's
Yes,
tradition now.
absolute shame. Yep. So let's just dive right into it. So this is Obi-Wan Kenobi. We talked about the first two parts that were released last week. So both episodes and the rest of the show are directed by Deborah Chow. Part one was written by Joby Harold, Hossein Amini, and Stuart Beattie. Part two is written by Harold with Amini and Beattie only receiving storyboard credits. So my understanding to get into some of the background information of this, my understanding of that is, so Hossein Amini was hired back when this was a movie that was going to be directed by Stephen Daldry. But then that morphed into a TV show after Solo bombed, and Daldry left, and Amini stayed on board to write the show. But then Kathleen Kennedy was not happy with his scripts. She said they were too dark and not hopeful enough. So they brought on Joby Harold to rewrite them.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how this kind of came about. But apparently they kept enough of his scripts for him to receive not just a storyboard credit, but a writing credit on the first episode.
Okay.
Yeah, but I guess the majority of the tone and feel and themes and ideas are probably mostly from Harold. The score for the series was composed by Natalie Holt, with the main theme provided by John Williams, and the cinematography is by Chung Hoon Chung. So in these two episodes, we have a depressed Obi-Wan Kenobi hiding out in the deserts of Tatooine, keeping a distant watch over Luke despite Uncle Owen's protestations. But then he receives word from Bail Organa that Leia has been kidnapped and reluctantly leaves the planet to rescue her. And in episode 2, he finds her, only to learn that the kidnappers were hired by the third sister, Inquisitor Reva, to draw him out of hiding. Fights and shenanigans ensue, and they escape, but not before Obi-Wan learns the truth of Vader's identity. So, Drew, what did you think?
Well, I really enjoyed both episodes. Especially the first episode. Something that I actually wanted to mention before we go into the first episode actually was the recap that plays before the first episode was really, really good. Obviously didn't need to watch it, but I felt that it set up the show really well and transitioned nicely into how it opens. And just the music in that recap was really good.
Yeah, I feel like there's probably a lot of people watching this show who haven't seen the prequel since they came out in theaters.
Yeah,
Like,
honestly.
especially amongst like the older generation. So they probably did need that. Um, yeah. So I didn't love it. Just gonna make this a little weird because I mean I like being positive, and I definitely will mention all the things I liked, and we're in a messenger group together, and we've been fighting over this. Yeah, so I will dive in. I will start to cover my some of my criticism, then I'll hand it back to you and get back to some more positives. For me, so we didn't get to do a series on the Book of Boba Fett. One of the reasons was I didn't really like the show either, but also was just time wise. But I'm a lot of my issues that I have with this series are also shared by the Book of Boba Fett. It's I don't trying to figure out where to start because there's a kind of a series of issues. I think for one, I'm not a huge fan of the story that they've chosen to tell, or more specifically, how they've chosen to tell it. Part of this is me wishing they made a different show, which I try not to do too much. I try to accept what the story the filmmakers are trying to tell at face value. But here we're kind of coming to something where it's like, I don't know if the story should have been told, which is kind of an awkward place to be in. In that, my vision of Obi-Wan Kenobi between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope, and kind of how we see him in various comics and short stories. There's a really wonderful short story in the A Certain Point of View book. And then, of course, his appearance in Rebels is he is the distant, watchful guardian. Like at the end of Revenge of the Sith, he gives Luke to Uncle Owen in Mount Beru, and he stands off and spends the next 20 or so years, 19 or so years, watching and guarding. And when the occasional threat shows up, just quietly taking care of them. And that's kind of what we see in the other stories and in the books and comics, and especially in Rebels, where like when Darth Maul shows up, he just kind of watches him from a distance as he wanders around going mad in the desert. He wasn't even going to do anything until Ezra kind of showed up and messed everything up. But it's like he's just watching. He's like this noble mythical figure. And I really dislike the idea of him leaving Tatooine. I don't know. It's like it's this consistent image of him that I don't think I created this in my mind. I think this is what has been presented in the series so far. So having him going off and doing various adventures and swashbuckling, saving princesses and all that, it just doesn't sit right with me. That said, this is a story, and they decided to tell it, and going along with it, I also don't love how it's told, but I'll get more into that later. So that's kind of how I'm coming into it. Full disclosure, I didn't really want an Obi-Wan series. I just thought the potential to damage my view of what Obi-Wan was too high, and it happened. And yeah, so that's where I am. What about you? Like coming into the series, what is your view of the story they've chosen to tell?
Yeah, that's actually what really surprised me with the show, because whenever they first said like, oh, Vader showdown and like all that stuff and really like hyping it up, I'm like, how are they going to do this? Because it could work really well or it could work really badly, and the way that they're approaching it, I'm completely fine with, honestly. And I actually really appreciate them using Leia as the catalyst for this story, and the reason why is because we're never, I don't think, unless I'm just like forgetting, I don't think we've ever learned how Leia knew Obi-Wan. Maybe they've said it in one of the books, but I can't remember off the top of my head.
It's through her father. Like years ago, you served with my father in the Clone Wars. I think that's kind of the thing where Bail Organa was one of the primary architects of the rebellion, and so Obi-Wan Kenobi was kind of like one of the assets he had he knew was on Tatooine, and when he needed him, he reached out to him, and obviously gave that information to his daughter. But I don't. Another issue. I don't. You don't really get the feeling watching A New Hope that Obi-Wan and Leia, not only did they know each other, but they went on this wonderful adventure together, or probably traumatizing adventure, but this grand adventure together. I don't. Like, it's a small problem. Like it's not doesn't destroy A New Hope or anything.
No.
But for me, it's a little kind of irritating. Like, I don't see that in Carrie Fisher's performance. Like when he dies, she doesn't seem to care at all, which I feel like would not be the case if this was the man who came after her when she was kidnapped at 10 years old. Like I feel like there would be a bit more connection than we've seen. But yeah. So as far as the story, like, what is your view of like the story they're telling? What are you thinking about the themes and all of that? How's that striking you?
Yeah, yeah, like I said, I like how they're using Leia as the catalyst for the story. Um, and I did really appreciate how in the first episode they did show Obi-Wan kind of wrestling with the gray area of, oh, should I help people or should I not? Um, and granted, we didn't see a huge amount of it yet, but in the first episode, we did get to see glimpses of what we've seen in the comics before, where he was placed in situations where, people were like about to be harmed or different things like that by even the Empire, and he would choose not to help because he doesn't want to give himself up, and to protect Luke. Um, so I liked how they showed that a little bit, because that was something that I was like really worried about going into the show. Um, since we knew that he would leave Tatooine, they said that before the show came out. Um, so I appreciated how we did get to see glimpses of that. Like with, for example, like the Jedi that they were chasing after on Tatooine.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, the war's over, we lost, the Jedi are done.
That's a great
Hide your
line from the
lightsaber.
trailer.
Yeah. Yes, and what makes it so great is it's a nice callback to one of the best Star Wars films, The Last Jedi. It's like poetry, it rhymes. But yeah,
Okay,
so
building off of that,
yeah.
one of my issues, the reason I'm having a hard time really connecting deeply with this show is I'm a little confused as to what they're saying about who Obi-Wan is at this point, what he believes, and what he's doing on Tatooine. So on one side, you have him watching over Luke, bringing him toys, apparently with the idea of sparking some hope of getting off this planet in Luke. And so with in mind to, as he says to Uncle Owen, when the time comes, he must be trained. So my understanding of Obi-Wan's mission wasn't only I'm here to protect Luke. It was I'm here to watch and protect Luke, and then when the time comes, I'm going to train him, and together we're going to go out and fight the Empire. Is that how you saw it?
Wait, what was that? You cut out for
Uh,
a second. I was lagging, I think.
my understanding of Obi-Wan's purpose on Tatooine was that he's going to watch and protect Luke till he comes of age. Then he's going to train him, and together they're going to go fight the Empire. Like that is that that's how I viewed it all these years. Is that how you've seen it?
I don't know if I ever saw it as well. I don't know. That's actually honestly a really good question. I think my views have changed over the years about it because, as we mentioned before, the little comic that they had showing Obi-Wan watching over Luke, um, and then also with like A New Hope, I never really like saw it as Obi-Wan wanting to train Luke to fight the Empire. Um, I always kind of just saw it more as him wanting to protect Luke.
Just the son of his friend kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. Just because I like it never really seemed like Obi-Wan wanted to fight. Like it kind of seemed like he was pretty dead set on wanting to be done. Um, and with him being like the hermit that he is in A New Hope, and not seeking after Luke, they just kind of like ran into each other. Um, I don't know. That's I guess the impression that I got, but I definitely can see where you're coming from with your viewpoint.
So that brings me to kind of my question about this series is that on one hand he's telling Owen when the time comes he must be trained, and he seems to have a purpose with his interactions with Luke, And then on the other hand, he's telling the Jedi played by Benny Safdie, the war's over, we lost, give up, stop helping people, none of it matters anymore. And so I'm a little confused. Is like which is it? What is he like? Does he truly believe? Has he truly given up all hope? If so, why does he want to? Maybe like the Uncle Owen half of the story um, is like a remnant of an older script that they kind of then wrote on the more depressed, version where Obi-Wan's lost hope and he's just kind of drifting in life right now. And I'm having a difficult time connecting them because I think the primary story and plot of the series seems to have really be playing more on the hopeless side, to the point where I guess like it's hard to tell because they didn't really set it up, but it seems that he hasn't even used the Force at all. Like when Leia falls and he reaches out and grabs her, it seems to take a tremendous amount of effort, as if he hasn't done that in years. So that seems to be more the side of the story that the series is playing on, and so the conflict with Uncle Owen seems to stick out a bit more for me. But I guess kind of moving in and talking about the plot of the series. So this series, I guess, is about Obi-Wan Kenobi coming out of a depression that he sunk into after all that happened in Revenge of the Sith. And he's brought out of it by having to leave the planet and go and rescue Leia and face his fears and kind of regain hope. How do you feel about them using Leia being kidnapped as kind of the plot device to get us out of there?
Yeah. Again, I honestly was not expecting Leia to be in the show at all.
Speaking of which, the marketing for these Star Wars shows is incredible.
Yeah.
For Mando, Boba Fett, and this, Boba Fett didn't really have a plot, so they couldn't spoil it. But I feel like with all these shows, they show pretty much entirely from all the material in the trailers is from the first 2 episodes. So once you get there, it's like I have no idea what the show is after this. It's kind of exciting.
Yeah. Yeah, I really agree with that. And like speaking of with that, like they kept Leia being in the show such a secret, and I'm really surprised. I mean, there is potential that maybe there was a leak out there, but I didn't see it, which I'm really glad because I'm really surprised. Like, usually we'd have Hollywood Reporter or like Deadline or someone reporting on something like that, but they kept that secret.
And they've kept and every one of these shows has had a big secret, like Cad Bane, Luke Skywalker, Grogu.
Yep.
They've had a secret like that, and it's wild. Maybe I have my Twitter follows are really well curated to where none of them are jerks who would spoil it. But it's been great how secret they've been. So yeah, Leia is one of the leads of this show. The actress, I am completely blanking on the actress who plays it. She's not a very good actress, but she's so adorable. I don't think it really matters. Like, there's a level of cuteness a child can attain to where bad acting no longer becomes a problem. And she's definitely in there. She's just so cute.
Yeah.
Vivian Lyra Blair. Vivian Lyra Blair is her name. Go ahead.
Yeah, her performance. Yeah, I mean, like, it's not like a 10 out of 10 performance. I do think that she has the mannerisms of Leia, though, and just some of the dialogue. Like, you can see, like, oh, this is Leia. Like the dialogue that she has with her cousin, and how she just kind of like is the bigger person and kind of just shows him what's up. I'm like, oh yeah, that's Leia. That's just totally something Leia would do. So
it's a very prickly person.
Yeah.
And like, I love how like the first thing that happens when Obi-Wan comes to rescue her, she hits him with a chair, and then spends the rest of the episode just criticizing his rescuing technique, which is very Leia.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, like speaking of Leia, though, we got to talk about how my boy Bail Organa is finally back. Oh,
Yeah.
every single time I see him, I'm just super happy. And I mean, I know you're not a huge fan of Leia being in the show, but it's worth it for Bail.
Yeah, they have a really sweet relationship where he's the more kind of doting father who might be spoiling her a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's always good. Moving on to some of the other cast, we have the Inquisitors. And there was a bit of controversy when the trailer came out because Rupert Friend plays the Grand Inquisitor, who was previously played by Jason Isaacs. And his head was not tall enough to satisfy the fans, me included. How do you feel now that we've actually seen his performance? How do you feel about him taking on that role?
Yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about it quite yet. I think oh, looks like someone's trying to join a guest appearance. What's this?
Oh, you mean Michael commenting?
No, I mean Josh in the chat.
Oh, there he is. Hello? I didn't think he'd make it.
Hello.
Hi, we are live.
Something's not working. Hold on 1 second.
This is Josh, our fearless leader. Welcome.
Hello. My camera not working. As it always is with me, something goes wrong. Always. And for some reason my camera is not working, but I will get it working here in a moment. I've just been listening to the conversation at this point and taking it all in. If I pop out for a moment and pop back in, it's because I'm trying to get my camera to work. So,
all right. Well, welcome. Continue, Drew.
Yeah. Gosh, now I'm trying to remember what we were talking about.
Grand Inquisitor.
Yeah. Okay.
And he's
yeah. I feel like we didn't see enough for me to like be sold on his performance as the Grand Inquisitor. We saw him very briefly. I'm also not a huge fan of his character design, but I'm just like, it's whatever. It's not something that we can change, sadly. But yeah, I hope we see more of him because I want to give him a chance. But from the little that we saw, I can't really like say that I was wowed or anything. It was just pretty standard.
Mhm. How about the Inquisitors in general?
Yeah, I'd say definitely. Even though I really enjoy both episodes, the Inquisitors are one of my criticisms.
Yes, finally we agree on something.
They're not, except gosh, I'm forgetting which Inquisitor is.
Fifth brother.
Yes, the fifth brother. I actually really like him so far. Even though we haven't seen a huge amount of him, but I was really sold on. Like,
he's the only one that seems competent.
yeah, yeah. He's the only one that seems competent, and then also like just I like for example, I really love the voice effects that they have. Like if you listen closely, he has like some sort of like effect on his vocals, and it makes him sound more menacing, and it also makes him sound more alien. So I really liked what I've seen from him, and I can't wait to see him in action because we haven't seen him in action yet.
Yeah, the acting is good. The less said about them matching his look from the animation, the better.
Yeah.
Like he's even less accurate than the Grand Inquisitor, but oh well. Yeah, for me, I have a lot of problems with how the Inquisitors are portrayed. As I said before, they don't seem very competent in this show, and like in Rebels, whenever they showed up, it was genuinely scary. Like people are gonna die, things are gonna happen. Michael Hoover, hey Michael, is in the chat. He's saying he thought they were fantastic, and he liked Reva better on a rewatch, but still a bit of overacting. Yes, I will get to Reva. I have thoughts. Where was I? Oh yes, incompetence. There are two separate scenes in each episode where they corner a Jedi and then they start bickering amongst themselves and the Jedi escapes. It happens twice. And it's like none of these people would survive working a day under Darth Vader. Like both of them, all of them would have been very quickly executed. And which brings me to Reva, kind of the main antagonist of the show. And I don't like her at all. One, I don't think Moses Ingram is. I think she's genuinely bad in the performance. And I think the idea of the character is interesting. Like everything we've ever heard about the Empire is that it's very cutthroat. Like no one is there for the common good. Everyone is just trying to advance their own career, and they'll stab each other in the back, as soon as look at each other. So like that aspect of her only out to find this big catch and make her career out of that. That's really interesting. But performance-wise, the thing I kept thinking of whenever she was on screen was Veruca Salt from Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Like, I want it now. Where she just yells so much, and she's so constantly yelling, so her voice is constantly cracking. Like she always just feels like she has no control, and that just makes for a character that is, one, kind of irritating, and two, not impressive or scary in any way. It's kind of like where you'll have in shows with like a gang of criminals, there'll be the one kind of wild card who's just really loud and annoying, and usually the leader will kill them at some point because they're really irritating. She's kind of that role, which just doesn't work for me when she's the main villainous presence. And I think that's kind of unfortunate. And just overall, I do think this show has damaged the mystique of the Inquisitors quite a bit, just by how incompetent they seem to be. We've talked about cast. I can't believe we haven't talked about Obi-Wan yet. How are you feeling about Ewan McGregor's triumphant return for the first time since 2005?
Yeah, it's great, honestly. It feels like he hasn't even been gone for that long.
He hasn't aged at all.
Yeah, he hasn't aged, and he just it feels like Obi-Wan again. You could especially because I just rewatched Revenge of the Sith recently, to be on a Certain Point of View podcast. Shout out to the homies over there. But yeah, I recently rewatched Revenge of the Sith, and it's like he just stepped right back in the shoes and still had it in him. Which is really crazy because I know he said in an interview recently that he had to find his voice again, because it had been so long. So it took him a bit to get back into the role.
Yeah, I remember when watching the trailer when he has that the line, "When the time comes, he must be trained." It was like, oh my gosh, there's a lot of Alec Guinness going on in there.
Yeah.
So he found it, and I guess kind of he's trying to bridge the gap. Obviously, he's very, very good. I don't think the show has yet given him much of a chance to really go all out. There's no "you're my brother" kind of thing happening yet. I'm assuming it's coming. They've been heavily foreshadowing Vader, so I think he's going to do great when that comes. Overall, now he's been pretty subdued and quiet, but he's Ewan McGregor. He's so watchable. And I think just kind of there's one scene that I thought was really good is when they're at the meat packing plant, and as they're leaving, and the guy in front of them says, this is half of what we got last time, and the foreman comes over and starts bullying him, and then he looks at Obi-Wan and says, what are you gonna do? And that was like the one moment of these two episodes where I really felt something. Where it kind of goes right along with what that speech from the Inquisitor, where he's talking about, the key to hunting Jedi is patience. Jedi cannot help what they are. Their compassion leaves a trail. The Jedi code is like an itch. He cannot help it. Whereas the Inquisitor's method is simply wait and watch until someone starts helping people a lot, because that's what the Jedi are going to do.
Yeah.
And there's that the fantastic arc in the Clone Wars. I think it's season 5, the Zygerian slavers arc, where Obi-Wan has been captured by the slavers, and the overseer wants to break him, and the way he's going to break him is by making it so he can't help people. So whenever Obi-Wan fights back and tries to help his fellow prisoners, he executes some other prisoners. So he's going to break a Jedi spirit by putting him in a horrible situation where he cannot help people. It's like that felt like a really cool thematic continuation of that idea. And so seeing Obi-Wan in that spot where he's seeing someone in front of him being abused, and the overseer is like, what are you going to do about it? And he can't do anything. That's a really soul-crushing position for someone like Obi-Wan Kenobi, because that's what the Jedi are. The Jedi are people who help others. Yes, I thought that was very very effective. Let's see. Then there's Uncle Owen. It was such an incredible, bit of luck casting a completely unknown Joel Edgerton for 2 lines back in Attack of the Clones.
Mm-hmm.
That's really paid off, and he's great. I knew he this is one of the things I've always thought it'd be awesome to come back and see Uncle Owen, just because that character has always fascinated me. To where he clearly cares about Luke, but his way of showing it is to try and crush Luke's dreams, because he's afraid that his dreams and his passions are going to, and his desire to get out and see the world are going to kill him. He thinks his father's dead, so he thinks if my nephew follows in his father's footsteps, he's going to end up dead, and so he's trying to protect him, but in a way that is, I guess, damaging to Luke and bad for the rest of the galaxy. But it just makes for a fascinating character, and I really hope we get to. If his only big scene was already passed, I'm going to be so upset.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's always good to see him back in the role, because what a perfect casting, honestly.
Real quick. Michael said, you're not wrong about the Inquisitors feeling incompetent, but that's exactly how I always felt when watching Rebels, so it's pretty on brand.
I can
they could be, but I think the Grand Inquisitor, I would not include the Grand Inquisitor in that. He was always pretty intimidating.
I agree. Grand Inquisitor definitely was.
I will say
though, Jedi Fallen Order really showed.
And Josh is back.
And he's there with the camera.
And there is a buzz. Whoa. Wow. I'm going to mute him for now. Keep going.
Yeah. Sorry, Josh. Yeah. So in Jedi Fallen Order, they I feel like they did a really good job of showing the strength of the Inquisitors. And you don't even see an Inquisitor in that game.
You might have to call back. Just keep going.
Yeah. But yeah, I feel like they really show the strength in Jedi Fallen Order. We don't even see Grand Inquisitor in the game. And they're truly menacing in the game, honestly.
Oh yeah.
And granted,
those boss fights are so freaking hard. It made me so mad.
Yeah. Granted, they are this isn't a kids show like Rebels, so they have a little bit more freedom to work with them, but I felt like they were really good in the game, and so it's kind of frustrating that most of them feel incompetent in the show so far, but I mean that could change. I feel like part of it is just how absolutely dumb Riva is, like at making decisions, because she's an absolute loose cannon. Um, but I don't know. Hopefully, fingers crossed that it'll improve.
Yeah, my hope for Uncle Owen, going back to that, is that like Obi-Wan's gonna come back to Tatooine, but Reva will follow him, and then him and Uncle Owen will have to team up to take her down. Like that's what I'm hoping this show turns into. Yeah, continuing on. I'm going to come to my next. I think it's a big criticism of the show, but also it's a broader criticism of all these Disney Plus shows so far to varying degrees. And that is, I think this is a very technical filmmaking critique, and I'm guessing a lot of people wouldn't have even noticed it, but it's something that's really stood out to me, and that is the volume technology that they're shooting on, which is I'd be hard to explain it. If you want to know what the volume is, go on YouTube and just search, The Mandalorian, the volume. Is this really cool technology where you have this room of kind of TV screens on which they project the background of whatever the scene is going to be. It could be the inside of a building, it could be a landscape, it could be anything they want, and they put the actor in front of it and just shoot them. To where similar to what they would have done in the past with green screens, like the entire prequels were shot mainly in front of green screens, with CGI. And Josh is back. Let's see if this works this time. Hello. Nope. Oh my gosh. Sorry. So like the entire thing was the prequels was a very virtual production. And he's gone again. It was a very virtual production. And now they're kind of doing the same thing, except now instead of being in front of a green screen, they're standing in front of a TV screen of the background. And I think that has caused some problems with the filmmaking, to where I feel it now. I can feel that they're shooting this thing in a room. Like it causes limitations. Like there's only so much camera movement you can do. There's only so far an actor, like a character, can move. Like in the staging, like you can only walk so far, because if you keep walking, you're going to walk into a wall. It affects how you can light it, because if you light it too brightly, it's going to stand out from. You'll see it on the wall behind them. Like there'll be a different brightness than the rest of the background. You can't use ambient lighting. Like I was just to mention another show, I was just watching Stranger Things, and like there's a scene where a character is in a room and there's just this really bright ray of sunshine coming through the window, and you get just this beautiful light kind of bathing the room, and you can't have that with the volume. Like everything has to be lit very evenly, so it's either very bright or it's very gloomy. And you can't like sculpt the light around the character and make them stand out, or you can't like sculpt the light around the set. So it has these problems of, it limits your camera motion, it limits how much the actor can move, and it limits the staging, it limits how cool the lighting can be. And I also think it's like a mental block for some directors, to where when they're working in this small room, they shoot small. Like they just use a lot of mediums and close-ups, and they don't shoot beyond like when you're watching the prequels, there's a lot of problems that come from the shooting against the green screen, but George Lucas's vision was so big. So like he would frame the characters up really small in the corner, and the rest of the screen would be this incredible landscape of Coruscant or something. It's similar to like when you're watching the Hobbit films, like where you'll have like a lot of CGI background and it looks massive, but you also have like a live action element with a character shot in front of a green screen. And some filmmakers can't think beyond the volume, so they just shoot small. And when you're in Star Wars, like small just feels wrong. So that's a problem that I keep coming into. it makes these shows just feel kind of cheap and made for TV and small when you're shooting on the volume. And we saw in The Mandalorian, like there's the one Robert Rodriguez episode where they go outside and you're like, oh my gosh, this feels so much bigger. And it's like they just shot like 20 minutes out of LA in the hills somewhere.
Yeah.
But because it was real, you can just feel it. And even if you can't see the wall when you're watching it, I can still kind of feel it in the constraints of the filmmaking. Also, another thing is I'm seeing between Book of Boba Fett and this show, where I know there are a lot of talented filmmakers, but there's just kind of a weird, again, almost like prequel-esque thing to where a lot of the acting feels subpar, and like a lot of just the staging of human interactions feels really weak. For example, I think like when the kidnappers are chasing Leia, and it's like she's so slow, but they're like, "Oh my gosh, I can't catch her," despite them being faster than her. It looks really dorky. Just the way some of the conversations are staged. I'm wondering if because they're shooting on the volume and there's so much less logistics involved, like they don't have to move the lights the same way, they don't have to move from locations, they don't have to dress the sets. I wonder if if the studio is giving them like way less time to shoot it, because so many of the line readings, like all of the extras are kind of terrible. Like the ones who have like one or two lines, they're really stiff. Even some of the people we know are good actors just feel a little off.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if they just did not have time, because it feels like so many of the line readings and conversations are like first take kind of things. Like we just don't have time.
Yeah, I definitely felt that in the first episode a little bit with Ben Safdie. Like, because obviously we know he's a great actor, good time. He was also really solid in Licorice Pizza.
Yeah.
So yeah, like it definitely felt a little weird, like hearing him not hear like just the way he like spoke the dialogue. It didn't sound like it just didn't feel like a great performance, which is not what I'm expecting from him.
Yeah, and even like I don't think Ewan McGregor was bad, but I've watched him be absolutely magnetic so many times. I feel like even he wasn't up to what we know he can be in other places and other shows and stuff. Maybe that was intentional. Like maybe, hey, I'm depressed, so I'm gonna tamp down my charisma. But
Yeah.
I don't know. I just missed some of that charm.
Yeah, no, I do feel that. I think that might be intentional though.
Mhm.
Just because of like his current state and everything. I don't know. I'm sure that'll change as we go along through the season though.
Yeah, it just comes up in little things, like talking about how it feels rushed. Just little things like Obi-Wan flashes his lightsaber so many times, and like there's conversations that very much should be private are kind of happening around other people. Like when he's Michael agrees with us about the chase, but he very much disagrees about Ewan. I feel like yes, like this when they're walking through a crowded street and he's openly discussing with Leia about him being a Jedi. It's like just like shut up, you can't be doing this, someone's gonna overhear you. Or the time when after Riva lets Benny Safdie escape, and like the Grand Inquisitor just starts chewing her out in front of an entire room they were just interrogating and trying to intimidate. It's like they're very much. It's just like weird staging choices like that don't feel like they actually gave a lot of thought into how they shot the show. Yeah, I don't know why, but my guess is they were just very, very rushed. So kind of moving to in the second episode where they're in on the. Do you know what the planet's called? Do they ever say his name?
Dayu, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. What Bail Organa says the name whenever he's talking to Obi-Wan in the first episode at the end. He's like, yeah, they're taking her to Dayu.
Okay. And speaking of the volume, I think that the backgrounds there look really good. Just that kind of
I
neon
wanted
look.
to mention that earlier. I think the second episode looks great with the planet and everything. I was like, I was really impressed with it, especially because some of the volume stuff that we've seen in the past, especially in Book of Boba Fett, was so lackluster. Um, so I was like really sold on it. I think part of it has to do with the fact that it's nighttime.
Hmm.
So the dimmer lights and the contrast with the saturated neon lights just probably works a lot better for it.
Yeah, I think straight darkness doesn't work that well. There's scenes from like in episode 4 of Mandalorian, the Sanctuary, or um, in the Jedi from season 2, where I feel like the Dark Forest, it's like they have to light the character a little bit brighter so you can actually literally see the wall. But I think the neon lights kind of help it pop more to where it doesn't look fake.
Definitely.
Um, Yeah, and there was. I think overall, I was very disappointed in all the action. However, one sequence that I really did like was Obi-Wan's tussle with the drug dealers or spice dealers in the hallway, and I really like that it looks like he's using judo, which feels like the most, not only just the most Jedi style, where you're just kind of redirecting energy and making them hurt themselves, but also it's very much an Obi-Wan style. Because like if you watch his lightsaber fights in Revenge of the Sith and also throughout the animated series like the Clone Wars and his one spot in Rebels, where he's someone who kind of like places himself in the center of the action and does a lot of deflecting. Like it's just a really interesting fighting style where he's kind of like the eye of the storm at all times. So I feel like judo, where he kind of lets them come to him and then tosses them away, feels very much on brand, and it was very well choreographed, I thought.
Yeah, I definitely, that fight scene stood out to me. And then also, it's very brief, but in the chase sequence in episode 2, whenever Obi-Wan pulls out the blaster and starts shooting at I think it's the droid is what he's shooting at. I really liked that shot of him like pulling out the blaster, and also it's just like funny seeing him use a blaster because
and he's really bad at
it's
it.
so uncivilized. Yeah, and he's bad at it. So
Which is it's just funny. It felt so weird because all the time in Star Wars, like everyone's a dead shot. Like they pull out their blasters, bang, one shot, they get the bad guy, and he's like missing every shot, and it was like this feels so wrong and weird. But I guess in character with Obi-Wan,
very in character, and also I think it makes sense given that he hasn't been doing anything for all this time, so
yeah,
he's a bit rusty, and you can even see that whenever he's fighting the gang members. He just like he gets
punches
a little
the
bit beat up.
Zabrak's horns.
Yeah, he
Which,
gets
come
beat
on,
up
you've tussled with Maul enough. You should know better than that. Come on.
That's true.
Yeah. Anything else in particular that you wanted to mention? Kind of getting to the end of my notes.
Yeah. The score, incredible. I really love the Obi-Wan theme that John Williams did. And also, there hasn't been any standout tracks in particular from the other composer. I'm blanking on her name.
Natalie Holt.
Yeah, there hasn't been any standout tracks yet from her, but all of it is very fitting for the situations and everything. And I'm sure that later on in the season we'll get some standouts from her, especially because her work in Loki was incredible. So I'm interested to see what she kind of does with the music later on. Hopefully she'll play with like some of the original themes and tracks from the prequels, Duel of the Fates, maybe.
Well, Battle of Heroes. I mean, we've got to get some of that. One thing I have to mention: Dinosaur Bounty Hunter, just super cool. Utterly
Yeah.
ridiculous, but I kind of love it. Also, you can really see that's one spot where it's like that has to be from Joby Harold, because he was one of the writers on John Wick Chapter 3, where you have kind of the same a very similar scene of all the bounty hunters in the city getting a message that now we can hunt John Wick. Very similar thing with now they're all going to hunt Obi-Wan Kenobi. That was kind of fun.
I did also. I think actually in our spoiler chat, I was like, "Oh, this is John Wick now," or something like that.
Mhm.
But yeah, I really like that. Like I feel like it's the closest we'll get for a long while to like the planet Nar Shaddaa in the Star Wars universe. We
What
still
is
haven't seen
that?
that. It is basically like Coruscant, but really run down and bounty hunters everywhere.
So Coruscant below like level 20 here.
Yeah, it's like 1313, but the entire planet. Like it's a very dangerous planet. It's really prominent in the Knights of the Old Republic series. So yeah.
Michael said for me the track they played as we saw the Jedi hanging and the Alderaan music were standouts. I'm really bad about listening to unless it's like a really big theme blaring. I don't really remember much music from a film. I do need to go and listen to the soundtrack again.
Same.
So this show is kind of interesting where I feel like they've kind of resolved everything by the end of episode 2 to where like Obi-Wan's arc of getting out there and rejoining the fight, that was resolved when he left the planet. Obi-Wan's arc of reconnecting to the Force was resolved when he caught Leia. The Leia plot was resolved when they escaped. So I'm kind of like, obviously they're going to create some more escapades and shenanigans and obstacles for them to fight, but it is kind of weird. It feels like everything's resolved by the end of this episode. So I'm kind of like, I have no idea. Aside from obviously Vader has to come in somehow.
Yeah.
I really don't know what's the rest of the show about.
Yeah, it's same here. I honestly don't have any speculations, which I actually really like about that because that means I'm gonna be surprised, hopefully for the better. So yeah, I can't wait to see what happens next. And fortunately, we don't have to wait that long since the episodes are gonna release on Wednesdays from here on out.
All right, so let's dive into our final thoughts. I'll go first so we can end positively. Yeah, I guess my biggest issue with this show is pretty similar to my issues with the Book of Boba Fett, is that I don't really feel much of anything. Like there are moments I like, there are character beats or lore aspects like, oh, that's pretty cool. But like as a story, I'm not really connecting with it. I think a lot of that is just I feel it's very rushed. My ideal Obi-Wan show would have had a full episode of just Obi-Wan being depressed on Tatooine. Like for me, my ideal episode would have ended with like the Inquisitors arriving on the planet. Like this show begins with that, so we're like instantly in the plot. I wish you could have had a whole kind of episode to just luxuriate in the depression and hopelessness of the character and slowly ease out of that. But this show just started so fast and so quickly into the plot that I don't know. It just for me, I'm not having the time I need to emotionally become invested. So it's just kind of. For me, it's a show that it's happening, and I don't hate it. Like I think it's better than the Book of Boba Fett. I think the direction overall is better. I think having a plot makes it better than the Book of Boba Fett. But also, I don't love the direction, and I don't love the plot. So like, it's better, but only marginally for me, and that's very disappointing. Like I think Mando, while inconsistent, has generally been pretty great. And then there are some episodes which are just like, this is as good as Star Wars ever gets. And to watch a Star Wars show and not really feel anything is kind of disappointing. Question for you. Like for me, I don't really have a lot of hopes for this show because I know, it's the same writer, same director going forward. Like with both Boba Fett and with Mandalorian, if I didn't like one episode, well, there's a different director next episode, so like it could completely come around again. Whereas a single director, single writer, it makes it consistent, but you lose that kind of unpredictable hope So for you, having seen these 2 episodes, are you more excited for the future of the show than you were before it premiered, or less excited? How are you feeling about going forward?
I'd say I'm pretty much the same for the most part. But I definitely think that I'm more excited to see Vader now than I thought I was gonna be. Which is good because again, I didn't know how I felt about Vader coming back, but I'm so curious and excited to see Hayden Christensen as Vader. Um,
I mean, you couldn't even recognize. I don't think we'll be able to even recognize him. Like the last
yeah.
shot, that's a lot of latex he's under.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
Or
I can't.
whatever material they use.
I can't wait to like just. I really hope he's gonna get like a fair amount of dialogue. I just want to see like how he delivers that and everything.
Oh, it's bringing me back to Rebels. The way they mixed Matt is it Latin or Lanter? Lanter, right?
Yeah,
The way they mix his voice and James Earl Jones as he says
so
Ahsoka.
good. So good.
If we can get some bits of sound design like that, that'd be so cool.
Yes, I would love that. So yeah, I'm really curious to see more of that. I'm still fingers crossed, really hoping that we see Qui-Gon. I think that
they have to, like they because in the recap they devoted a good bit of time to talking about you will learn to communicate with Qui-Gon. If they don't show that, like
it'll be such
so
a
wrong.
huge misstep. But yeah, I really feel like we will. Just from the little teases that we've had. And obviously they don't say it directly, but it's kind of you're under the impression that Obi-Wan is cut off from the Force until episode 2, and that's why whenever in the first episode he's calling out to Qui-Gon, he wasn't getting any answers. So I hope we see Qui-Gon. I hope they really play with more of like the nightmares and like I guess the guilt that Obi-Wan may be feeling with what happened. Because obviously it wasn't his fault, but I'm definitely sure when Owen said, "Oh, like you trained his father," that probably was like a huge punch to the gut for him.
That is so wrong. But I love it.
Yeah.
All right, so it's just kind of overall closing thoughts on the show. How you liking it?
Yeah, I really enjoyed both of the first 2 episodes. It's not perfect, but I feel like it's a breath of fresh air compared to Book of Boba Fett for the most part, because Book of Boba Fett was just not it for me. And even though I still had some fun with that show, there was only like 2 episodes that really stood out to me. And
that's the funny thing about these shows is that if you ask me Book of Boba Fett, like, oh, it's a bad show, but also I straight up love 2 episodes. Like, so I have very mixed feelings.
Yeah.
All right. So I think that'll be it for this week. We'll be back, I think Thursday this week, to talk about the next episode. And come join us in the Outer Rim on Facebook and subscribe to the YouTube channel. These videos will also be going up there. And until next week, we will see you later.